Oh.
So I have 8 of them. So I have been learning about the Norwalk train crash of 1853.
Yeah.
Train went over the
pretty big crash.
Yeah, a train went off a bridge and 46 people killed, led to major changes in laws regarding rail safety. Pretty big deal. I never heard of it before, but
yeah. I have a couple friends that are big railroad buffs and rail history too. They probably could tell me all about it. So I assume Peter's joining us since he seems so keen to.
Yes. Come on, Peter, where are you?
Ryan and Tony, what time is the your agenda item summary meeting today?
It was normally scheduled for 2, but we're doing 3:30 because Ben has a conflict.
Okay, I'll send out the agenda.
Okay. Which reminds me, I actually need to send Kevin Deneen a quick note asking him about the extent to which we can, given that we have ongoing issues with UConn, some of which are already linked to pending litigation, what extent we can talk about things that aren't. I'm just going to mute her.
Peter says he can't get in yet.
Tasha, I have to send Kevin Deneen a quick message. If you could reach out to Peter and maybe help him figure out why he's not able to connect.
I emailed Peter the link. I thought I had his.
He says you can get on as an audience member, but not with video.
Yay, Peter.
Hey,
Hello, sorry for making, wow, everything more complicated. I didn't mean to do that.
okay, are we ready to go?
I am. Yes, I think we are.
Okay, are we online and recording?
This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Tony Moran, the mayor of Mansfield. This is our public hearing information session on the manager's budget for April 19th, 2021. We have several things we will be doing today. The manager will be presenting his budget, which has been presented to the town council, but the town council has not acted upon yet. Then we will talk about budget process, and then Mr. Aylesworth will present the budget in total. First, I'd like to introduce the chair of our finance committee. This is Peter Kotchenberg. Peter will talk about the budget process as we go forward. Mr. Kotchenberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Tony mentioned, my name is Peter Kotchenberger. I'm on the town council and chair of the finance committee. The process, the schedule has changed from when we posted it earlier in the year, in part because, and some of this is good news, because we will receive a yet undetermined amount, we hope, of federal funds related to COVID-19, and not knowing what that is, along with, of course, the state budget situation, makes as well as whether we can have an in-person town council meeting, a town meeting to vote on a budget is also somewhat tentative. So this Thursday, the town council and public workshop, a public session, will have a discussion on the budget, the final one at least scheduled as of now, and then later in the month, in May, on May 24th, the budget will be adopted by the town council, which simply means that it then will go to the town meeting. We'll have a public information session, another one like this, perhaps live, although more likely virtual, to discuss the budget that the town council recommends as proposed for the town, dependent on the will of the voters. And then the annual town meeting will follow. So typically, we have had the meeting, of course, on Tuesday, first Tuesday in May, and we will move this once we have a better sense of location as well as the finances and what additional money hopefully Mansfield will receive. We will then have the town council meeting, the town meeting, and this will likely be in mid-June, although again, a date to be determined. This will all be online. The current budget schedule is online, and the amended version will be online very shortly. And with that, I turn it back to our mayor to introduce our still new in some ways, although thankfully not. I mean, he's been around. He's very visible, and that's great. So but I'll turn it over to Tony to introduce our town manager.
Thank you, Peter. As many of you will recall, our normal town meeting is always a little tentative because it's usually held in early May, and the General Assembly does not adjourn this year until early June. So we're always waiting to see what the General Assembly will be doing, and we're taking guesses on what the state's budget will allocate to the towns. In addition, this year, of course, we have federal funding coming that has not been clearly defined. We're waiting for information from the U.S. Treasury on how this money can be spent. We clearly will be using this money to offset the costs that incurred by COVID, but there may be some additional flexibility having to do with infrastructure and some other things. So we are sort of dragging our feet until we can get a final idea of what money will be coming to the town. So now I'd like to introduce Ryan Aylesworth. Ryan came to us from Enfield, New Hampshire. as a result of a lengthy search process. Many of you will have met him already, seen him in our town council meetings, or heard him on WILI, where he is doing a monthly radio program with Wayne Norman. We're extremely pleased to have Ryan with us. He has small town experience. He has, we believe he is farsighted and innovative. And there's a lot to be done in Mansfield, as you know. This is his first budget, so it's his first round with us on these kinds of experiences. Interestingly enough, our Director of Finance, Charmaine Bradshaw Hill, this is her first budget year with us. She's been working with the assistance of Sherry Tran, our retired Finance Director, but still, it's a new experience all the way around. So I'd like to turn this over now to Ryan. Mr. Aylesworth, would you introduce your budget?
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the kind words. Before I jump into the budget, for anybody who's listening, I just want to say what an honor and privilege it is to have the opportunity to manage Mansfield each and every day. It's a wonderful community. It's been an incredibly welcoming community, not just for myself as a professional, but for our entire family unit. And just very, very grateful to be here and working on behalf of the town. And while COVID has made it a little more challenging for me to interact with residents and members of the public because our town offices continue to be open by appointment only, I look forward to that changing. And my door, once that day comes, will always be open, and look forward to visiting with residents and hearing your thoughts and concerns and the goals that you have for your community. So thank you all for this opportunity. I also just want to mention before jumping in too far that there are archived video of recent budget presentations that have been given, including essentially a carbon copy version of the one you're about to hear from me. So if you go on the town's website and look those up, those were given on April 7th, April 8th, the 14th, and 15th. And so a lot of what we talk about today, or I talk about today, won't go into the gory details. And for those details around various department requests or capital improvement program requests, I would encourage you to go find the archive video from the budget workshops that have already been conducted, because a lot of the questions you may have will be answered there. But on the topic of questions, we do have a way for you to participate today. If you're watching live and you want to call in and ask a question, the number to call is 646-749-3122. And I'll put out a reminder as we get a little deeper in the presentation of that opportunity. When I set about with department heads and our finance director, Charmaine, went about developing my budget request, my recommended budget, one of the things that was at the forefront of my thinking were the guiding values and the principles that are outlined in the Mansfield Tomorrow Plan. The Mansfield Tomorrow Plan, for those of you who haven't read it, it's a planning and development document, but it's actually more than that. It's not just a land use plan. It's basically the town's master plan, and it's the vision document for the town. The Mansfield Tomorrow Plan was adopted in 2015, so we're about 6 years into its implementation, and we'll be updating this plan in the next 4 years or so. But these are, as you see here in front of you, these are some of the guiding values and principles from the plan. And I believe it's of the utmost importance that any budget that we advance, that we move forward with, reflect these values and align with these values, because ultimately your budget document is the most, arguably the most important policy document a town has. And logically, the aspirational goals and values that are stated in your master plan should be adequately funded. And so there needs to be alignment between those documents. Just a quick overview, because I know not everybody lives and breathes municipal government, and so this is just for summary purposes. Some folks may wonder, what exactly it is that the towns have the statutory authority to do. What exactly is a unit of local government? So unlike most states outside of New England, where incorporated municipalities are usually separated by unincorporated territory under the jurisdiction of a county, incorporated municipalities encompass all the territory within the state of Connecticut. There's no portion of the state that is unincorporated, and for all intents and purposes, there's no county government in the state of Connecticut. There's just county boundaries. There are 169 towns in the state, and they have a variety of powers, including the ability to levy taxes, eminent domain, environmental protection, a wide range of regulatory powers, and other powers and authorization. Towns are creatures of the state, and the powers of the towns are set forth by statute as well as the state constitution. But it's important to underscore that there is a long-standing tradition of local autonomy. Under Connecticut's Home Rule Act, towns are permitted to adopt their own local charter, which the town of Mansfield has, and choose their own structure of government. In terms of structure of government, there are three basic structures of municipal government that the state of Connecticut allows a municipality to choose from. Those are selectmen town meeting form of government, mayor council, and manager council. And it's the last of these three, manager council, that the town of Mansfield has adopted. It's important to note, though, that there are a couple of wrinkles that make us a little bit different than other manager council forms of government. Article 4 specifies that town meeting will approve a budget on an annual basis after the budgets are officially adopted by the town council. So while the town council is the legislative body for most things, it's important to note that town meeting does have the ability to adopt or reject both an operating and a capital budget. And as Peter said at the onset, those documents, those budgets are adopted and put forth to town meeting as recommended by the council. So it does go through the council first, but ultimately town meeting has the final say. Town council also serves as the governing body, so the governing body and the primary legislative body for the town. The town manager is appointed by the town council and serves as the municipality's chief executive officer. And Article 5 of the town's charter outline the authorities and duties of the town manager. This is a quick organizational chart of the town. As you can see, there are a wide range of elected and appointed boards and committees that are responsive directly to either the electors, if they are elected, or the town council, if they are appointed. And then within the town manager, think of the town manager as essentially the executive branch of government. This is where all your operating departments lie. And several operating departments, it's worth noting, are actually shared services. Finance, facilities, information technology are shared between the town and, in some cases, both the regional high school and Mansfield Public Schools, and in one case, in facilities case, just the town and Mansfield Public Schools. I want to highlight some accomplishments from the past year, just to kind of put in context the work that the town is doing on a regular basis. So obviously COVID-19 has dominated a lot of the focus, and it's been a major area of concern and challenge for the town over the past year. So responding to and coordinating efforts across agencies, both local and state agencies, has been a key area of accomplishment and activity or action over the past year. A number of important positions for the town have been filled. So my position, the director of finance, as the mayor alluded to, was just filled this year. We also recruited a new assessor. We have a new fire chief coming on board next month, and a staff accountant. So these are a number of key positions with brand new people in them. We have been working hand in glove with the Mansfield Public Schools and the school building committee to design and ultimately go through the sort of pre-construction phases of a new elementary school. That project was recently bid out, and we got our bids back, and very happy to say that project came in within budget. And so we have a few different options to move forward with, and that project looks like it'll be really kicking it into another gear here in the next few months, with a targeted construction completion date of late summer, early fall 2022. We recently launched a new town newsletter. We're doing this because we want to make sure that information on not just what municipal departments are doing, but information on what's going on in town is reaching the public, so everybody's aware, and promotes opportunities for public engagement. We've largely completed an extensive migration to a new financial management and accounting program. I think our finance director would say that process has shaved a few years off of her life, or at least added, maybe some gray hairs. But we're getting there. It's a critically important project, and very proud of the work that our finance team has been doing to shepherd that along. It's no small feat when you're transitioning away from software you've had for decades. You can only imagine how much has to be undone to make that process a success. We've been utilizing a pavement management study to continue our preventative maintenance program. We installed a Safe Routes to Schools walkway, which starts at Route 195 and ends at Southeast Elementary School. And we've been administering a wide range of Mansfield Community Center recreational programming with modified operations, again, to be safe in this pandemic situation that we all find ourselves in. A few other things to rattle off. We've been extensively streaming public meetings during the pandemic. We've implemented remote work systems so that our staff could continue to be productive and connect with one another if they weren't coming into the office during the pandemic. So there was no interruption in the quality of the service that was being provided, even if the way that service was being provided was in a bit of a modified format using a quote unquote touchless means. Suffice it to say, we've done a lot of different things as a result of the pandemic. That's touched every aspect of local government, the community center, town hall, public safety, the senior center. Everything we've done, every adjustment we've made has been with the overall goal of maintaining the highest level of service, but providing that service in a way that's safe to the public as well as our employees and our volunteers. We've completed extensive renovations to our municipal facilities and the schools. We've maintained library services during this time. We've been trying to support our local businesses who have struggled during the pandemic and trying to help connect them with the resources they need ultimately to get back up to full strength. And I'll talk a little bit more here in a minute about the American Rescue Plan and some of the ways the town's thinking about utilizing those funds to help in that area. We created and launched a Mask Up Mansfield campaign to encourage residents, visitors, and UConn students to wear masks, maintain social distance, and wash hands frequently in a community-wide effort to slow down the spread of COVID-19. We obtained a few small cities grants, community development block grants that total over $1.2 million. One of these grants, which was just north of $700,000, is funds towards a new hybrid fire apparatus. It's an aerial pumper apparatus, so it has a ladder to reach at the level of a structure fire in a multi-story building or over the top of the fire if needed. And that'll be housed at Station 207 in the Four Corners area. We've also launched COVID-19 resident assistance programs. Those funds are being used. It's a $500,000 grant in that case. Those funds are being used to provide childcare assistance and food security to low and moderate income residents that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking ahead, we have a number of challenges and opportunities sort of just past the tip of our nose. Obviously, the pandemic is not done. And so part of what we need to keep our eye on the ball here is that we need to make sure that we get through this thing while we want to believe the end's in sight, that the proverbial light is at the end of the tunnel as more and more people get the vaccine and a larger and larger percentage of our residents and the overall population has been fully vaccinated. We know that we have not achieved normalcy yet, and we are still a ways off from doing that. So how do we, as a town, ensure a safe return to normalcy? And we do that in a manner that's, expeditious, but at the same time paced properly so that we don't go too fast. We need to address aging and inadequate town buildings. So part of what we're trying to do to address that is complete a comprehensive needs assessment and basically a programmatic use study for our municipal facilities so that we can plan accordingly for the future. Mansfield Community Center, as has been discussed in many town council meetings, has definitely been experiencing financial hardship. Some of that is acute, some of that is seemingly directly brought on in a cause and effect way by COVID-19, and perhaps that is the lion's share. But there are also longer term or further reaching back financial challenges that the community center has been experiencing. And so we need to come up with solutions both for the short-term issues that COVID presented, as well as the longer-term financial solvency and sustainability of the community center. We need to make sure that we're prioritizing appropriately the municipal aid funds that we're going to receive through the federal government as part of the American Rescue Plan. We obviously want to continue to deliver the highest quality municipal services. So how do we do that in cost-effective ways? And what can we do to help local businesses, as I said before, respond to the negative impacts that they've experienced from the pandemic? And how do we also continue to recruit and attract new businesses and desired forms of development into this community? Because obviously commercial development has real potential to alleviate a lot of the tax burden on the residential property taxpayers, residential property owners. We're going to continue making progress in our marketing and branding strategy. So how do we position Mansfield as the highly desirable community in which to live, do business, learn, work, and play, and visit that we all know that it is? How do we get that word out there effectively? We want to make sure that we're keeping up with our infrastructure needs and our capital improvement investments. We want to continue to work on our affordable and workforce housing plan. This is something we recently launched with a grant, and ultimately with the goal of ensuring that Mansfield has housing stock available for everyone, all sorts of housing stock, regardless of socioeconomic condition, age, etc. We want to make sure that there's a place, a highly desirable place for all manner of people to live and work and enjoy Mansfield. We want to focus on our strategic planning. We want to make sure that the actions and operations being undertaken at the department level, municipal department level, are in alignment with our master plan and that everybody's rowing in the same direction. I mentioned the new school, but I didn't mention that it's going to be a net zero building. And so it'll actually be the first public school in the state of Connecticut, as far as I understand it, that's a truly net zero building. We're really excited about that, both from the standpoint of, cost efficiencies that can be gained, but obviously more importantly, or arguably more importantly, the values that conveys, what it signals to the rest of the world about what the town of Mansfield cares about and its position on environmental issues. We're committed to diversity and inclusion. We recently propped up a Human Rights Commission, which has really hit the ground running, and they have a lot that they want to accomplish over the next year to help ensure that our practices and our actions at a municipal level reflect our core values as a community. And ultimately, our relations with UConn is definitely a priority. We have so much shared interest. Our fates, as I've often said, are intertwined in a way that's, you really can't separate the two. But we do have a lot of disputes and challenges, and we need to navigate those. And we need to navigate those in a way that's mutually beneficial and identifying shared goals to work on. So with all that in mind, the budget presentation that you're hearing from me now and the numbers that are contained in my budget, my proposed budget, are a starting point. The council will as the mayor indicated and as Mr. Kotchenberger indicated, there will be a lot of deliberation still in the future about what's in these numbers, and the council reserves its right to make some changes, obviously, to what I've proposed. But as I formulated this budget with great help and input and effort from our finance team and department heads, the overarching goals were, and I've alluded to some of these already, but preserve and maintain the quality of our programs and services, maintain our pay-as-you-go capital plan. What that means is we're not financing things, we're not taking on more debt service than we need to, and we're not spending a lot more on interest and fees than we otherwise would need to. We want to continue to grow our general fund balance. We want to minimize increases in the mill rate to minimize any additional impact in terms of tax burden to our residents. We want to continue to find ways to achieve efficiencies, cost savings, ease of end user use for folks, whether you're doing conducting business online or in person. We want to make it easier and more accessible and less daunting, again, regardless of what the nature of your business is with the town. We want to promote transparency and accessibility of local government, doing so through not just the newsletter I mentioned earlier, but also improvements to our town's website, our social media presence, and other means of getting that message out to our residents. And ultimately, we want to advance the priorities and goals of the Mansfield Tomorrow master plan. Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, this is the number to call if you want to patch into this meeting and ask your question live, 646-749-3122. And so with that, I will hop into what folks are most interested in, the actual budget numbers. So the budget that I've recommended, the bottom line, which is inclusive of the town of Mansfield, Mansfield Public Schools, and our contribution to Region 19, the regional high school, is a grand total of $56.8 million. And as well as roughly $3.7 million dedicated to capital. And just a quick overview, a reminder in many cases for where the town gets its revenues. We obviously collect taxes. We receive aid from the state, municipal aid from the state, licenses and permit fees, charges for a variety of services, and other fees that constitute a much smaller portion of the budget. Oops. A quick breakdown of that budget picture shows that the lion's share, the vast majority of the funding that the town receives really comes in two forms. About 2/3 of the town's overall budget comes from taxes, and a little under 1/3 comes in the form of intergovernmental funds. That's the municipal aid that I was describing a moment ago. And only 2% comes from other sources, other charges for service, interest and penalties, etc. This is a 5-year trend, basically showing the same data from the pie chart I just had up, except instead of just showing this year's budget, which is the last bar chart here, it actually shows how those percentages have shifted a little bit over time. But as you can see, those rough percentages are pretty stable over time. As I said, 2/3 of our revenue comes from taxes, and so the aggregate value of our grand list, that's our net valuation, is a critical data point for us to sort of base our revenue forecast on. And right now, we're projecting a net grand list of $1.16 billion. That's just under 2.5% increase over last year's grand list, and the most sizable increases in the area of personal property, 7.6% increase year over year, a relatively modest 1.8% increase in real estate, real property, and just under 5% increase in motor vehicle excise tax revenues. As you can see, our grand list, as you would expect, with sort of general inflation playing in the background, our net grand list has grown steadily over time. If you look at the last 10 years and you fit a line to this chart, you'd see that it's a relatively consistent rate of increase over that 10-year period. As I said, preliminary grand list increase is just under 2.5% or $28 million. A few words here on our municipal aid, and in particular, payment in lieu of taxes that we receive from the state for state tax exempt property. Obviously, the University of Connecticut's facilities are sort of the lion's share of this here in Mansfield, given that we're the home to the University of Connecticut's flagship campus. As Peter may have alluded to at the beginning, there is some new legislation that has changed the formula for how pilot payments are to be calculated in terms of the maximal amount that a municipality is eligible to receive. However, it's important to note that the amount that we are authorized to receive and the amount the town actually receives through the appropriations process, the biennial budget process, can be quite different. And as you can see in this graph, even before the changes in the funding formula, the amount of money that Mansfield did receive in terms of payment in lieu of taxes and the amount it was eligible to receive has been quite different. So the blue bars here represent the maximal amount that the town of Mansfield could have received on an annual basis. And as you can see, a slow increase from one year to the next during this 6-year period shown on the graph. and the green bar is the amount we actually have received. And at best, you could say that that's somewhat level funded, and it's actually slightly decreased over time. So that gap between the amount the town could receive and the amount we have received has widened, and that's not a trend that's particularly good news, frankly, from our standpoint. And we're hopeful that starting this year with the new legislation in place that has gotten a number of people excited about or focused on this issue, hopefully that will work out in our favor, because obviously the additional aid we receive would go a long way in helping us minimize the remainder of the funding we have to raise in the form of taxes. I already spoke to this a bit. I might just point out that the new legislation proposed the establishment of 3 tiers. Tier 1 is for municipalities with an equalized net grand list per capita of less than 100,000, and that's the tier that Mansfield would fall within. And Tier 1 municipalities then are authorized to receive up to 50% of the assessed value of tax-exempt property. And so if this came to fruition, and it is a big if, but if it came to fruition, that could have the effect of increasing the amount in pilot that the town of Mansfield receives from just over $8 million presently to north of $20 million. So a $13 million swing. And that would have considerable implications, given that we currently raise over $30 million a year, about $36 million, I believe, is our tax levy. And so if something even close to 10 or 12 or $13 million was shifted from amount to be raised in taxes to the amount to be raised in payment in lieu of taxes, again, huge implications on the tax rate in Mansfield. But we'll see where the budget process plays out, and we'll see how close to that 50% level the town of Mansfield receives in the next budget. A few words on the American Rescue Plan, or ARP. This was the latest federal stimulus package that was enacted in the last, couple months. There are some pretty expansive and extensive municipal aid provisions in there. Kind of distilling it down to some very basic information, though, the town of Mansfield, we believe, is sort of set to receive about $7.5 million, $2.5 million of which would be in the form of direct aid to us as a municipality, and the remaining $5 million represents our proportionate share of the monies, which is $29 million, that Tolland County is slated to receive. So our overall population, I can't remember now, it's 15% or so of the 29 million. If we are 15% of the overall population of Tolland County, then we would receive around $5 million of the 29 million that the county is slated to receive. So we are still very much in wait and see mode, but those are the calculations based on information that's been shared widely by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and other partner agencies. Eligible uses of the municipal aid, though, this is really what towns and cities across the country are waiting on the most. We are awaiting official guidelines, detailed guidelines from the Treasury Department, so that we have more to go on than just the language of the legislation, which was pretty limited in this respect. So broadly speaking, and obviously details will be critical here, broadly speaking, the legislation has told us that municipal aid funds can be used to plug revenue holes associated with COVID-19, using the 2019 budget as a baseline. It can be used to cover increased expenditures and mitigate economic harm from the pandemic, which we interpret to mean that not only our increased operating expenses as a result of COVID-19, but the impact that the pandemic has had on private and nonprofit organizations in our community, that we would be in a position to help them with this aid. And also we can use funds to make investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure through what the law calls a state administered program, and we're not exactly sure what that means at this point. So again, additional details that'll be contained in the forthcoming guidelines from the Treasury Department will be critical. We do know at this point, however, that we can't use funds simply to lower the tax rate, to lower the mill rate, or grow our unassigned fund balance, which you may have heard referred to periodically as the town's rainy day fund. We are not able to do that. So it's a question of how we interpret these other various eligible uses that I just described. And we're all very eager to see what is contained in those Treasury guidelines. The town's budget is influenced extensively by a small handful of budget drivers. Those are employee wages and benefits, debt service, our capital improvement program investments, and general cost inflation for goods and services. This is a breakdown, as I start off by saying, our bottom line budget, inclusive of the budget for the town, for Mansfield Public Schools, and our allocation to Region 19, that $56.8 million. This pie chart shows how those dollars break down amongst the various entities. And as you can see, Mansfield Public Schools is this navy blue wedge, comprising about 42% of the overall budget. Our allocation to Region 19 is this yellow wedge, or about 20% of the overall budget. And then the remainder here is sort of breakdown on a not department by department basis, but basically all the different functional areas of municipal government. So you can see within the town's portion how those dollars are used. The town, my proposed budget calls for the town's component of the budget to be set at $21.62 million. That is a slightly over 5% increase from the current budget year. But as I'll describe in a minute, much of what's driving that increase is in a category of what we'll call contractual non-discretionary spending. Means that we don't really have a choice to spend less in a number of areas. And so a lot of that increase, that 5.3% increase, is already locked in, if you will. And then the remaining entities, and these are budgets that have been voted on and approved by the respective school boards. Mansfield Public Schools, a 2.3% increase over their current year budget, and Region 19, the town's allocation, about 1.2% increase over last year's or this current year's allocation. And since I made a note here at the bottom, if you took out the portion of the town's budget that really is contractually obligated stuff, the stuff that, frankly can't really be avoided, the increase in discretionary spending in my proposed budget is only about 1.3%. Expenditure trends. This is just showing, again, I mentioned those budget drivers. These are showing kind of the big ticket items that are driving the changes, increases or offsets, decreases in this year's budget. A couple things to point out. I talked about contractual salary increases. I talked about increased investment in our capital improvement program this year. I haven't mentioned yet, but it's definitely a significant factor. Increases in the cost of our medical insurance. And a lot of that is that year-over-year increase is being driven by what we're calling a COVID premium or a COVID correction that, our insurance agency is sort of laying over the top of what would otherwise be our normal rate of increase. And so that's driving an increase in that budget area, as well as anytime there are changes in employees and the number of people that are enrolled in the plan, or the type of plan that an employee is enrolled in. If they have a qualifying life event and they change from, a single plan to a family plan, that of course has budgetary implications for the town as well. We are happy though that our resident trooper program, basically based on natural retirements and cycling on of newer, somewhat, less tenured state troopers in our resident troopers office here, that is providing a small measure of budget relief, which is helpful. The townwide expenditures, which are broken out here on this slide, which includes the biggest ticket item being medical insurance increases. the townwide expenditures listed here represent about 18% of the overall town portion of the general fund budget. These are the numbers in this year's budget. It's a net adjustment of $396,000. And so of that overall roughly $1.09 million increase in the bottom line of the budget, which I'll go back to where that was shown here, this number, $1,090,000, roughly 36% of that overall increase is right here in these numbers. This $396,000 increase from one year to the next is driving that 36% increase. And again, just to give you a sense of just how much of this budget, in terms of year-over-year increase, frankly, is sort of inflexible and locked in. Overall net increase to Mansfield Public Schools is a little over $500,000 or 2.3%. Those of you interested in hearing more specifics about Mansfield Public Schools budget, I would strongly encourage you to watch back the presentation that Superintendent Kelly Lyman gave on April 15th, so last Thursday. Very thoughtful, comprehensive presentation that would be worth watching. A couple notes on our general fund balance. As you can see, over time, our general fund, the value of our unassigned fund balance in the general fund has grown, both in terms of actual dollars, but also in terms of percentages of the operating budget, pretty consistently, going back now about 15 years. And this is good. This is good to see. It's also showing you how close we are at present to basically being in direct alignment with the council's stated policy objective of a unassigned fund balance that is 15% of the overall operating budget. This year's budget, my proposed budget, does not propose raising taxes to specifically grow the general fund. So that's why this line is held flat. However, I just want to point out, and this gets a little complicated to explain, but the actual rate of increase in the general fund balance is not a matter of only what you budget for, but also where your actual expenditures come in relative to your budgeted expenditures and where your actual revenues come in relative to your budgeted revenues. And so if at the end of next budget year, the end of the FY 21-22 budget year, our actual expenditures come in under our budgeted expenditures and or our actual revenues come in over our budgeted revenues, we will grow our fund balance. Especially if both of those things happen, but even if one of those two things happens in a very significant way, we'll be able to grow our fund balance. And even if we don't, even as this slide shows, even if the dollar amount stays flat and we don't grow our fund balance, the percentage will still be north of 14%. So yes, just a little under 15%, but still very much in a healthy range. Healthy ranges are usually defined for a fund balance of for a municipal budget anyway, of between 8 and 17%. And that's based on guidance put out, or best practices, if you will, by municipal finance experts. And so we are in very much a healthy range right now, and that's a good thing. Another way of showing some of the information I've already touched on, this is a breakdown or a breakout of employee wages and benefits and the actual dollar amounts expended on those two particular categories in the general fund. I want to just quickly point out here that there's a bit of a jump. If the blue bar, the navy blue bar, represents aggregate investment in salaries, you'll note that there was a somewhat larger than normal jump between FY 19-20 and 2021. And that was because prior to the current budget year, the year that we're in now, some new positions were added, and I'll point to one as an example, a shared communication specialist position shared between the town and Mansfield Public Schools. And so creation of some new positions, full-time positions, led to a bit of a jump in terms of a one-time correction, and that's why you're not seeing a correspondingly large jump this year because we're not creating any new positions this year. This budget does not propose the creation of any new full-time positions. Debt service over time, there was a bit of an increase from 1920 to 2021, and I believe that's a combination of both the Four Corners Sewer Project being completed, as well as I believe the Mansfield Middle School Roof Project moving forward. But a very minor rate of increase from FY21 to FY22. Our capital improvement investments. I had a slide related to this earlier, but this year's total proposed investment in capital projects is just over $3.7 million. And this shows you where those dollars go in terms of functional areas. So the largest is public works, funding for our roads, bridges, and other public works needs. And then the second largest is facilities management, and that's funding basically for renovations and repairs to existing town buildings. And as the smaller percentages dictate or suggest, capital investment in other areas such as community development, general government, community service, education, technology, etc., kind of round out the smaller categories. This is a quick synopsis of where the funding is coming from for our capital non-recurring fund. This is basically funding the lion's share of that $3.7 million total investment I just described. The largest contribution is coming from the general fund. And so $2.38 million would be raised and appropriated from taxes to fund this year's contribution to the capital non-recurring fund. We also use revenues, the lion's share of the revenues from our ambulance fees. This year, we're projecting lesser revenues, kind of a continuation of somewhat suppressed revenues from the current budget year, revenues being down because people are being, I guess you could say, a little bit more selective about when they elect to request ambulance transportation during a time of a pandemic. And so in a more normal year, quote unquote, we would project about $400,000 here, but for this year, we're projecting $300,000. And then the last piece is the Pequot Mohegan grant. This year, about $180,000. It's been set, I believe, at that amount for several years now. There was a time when those funds were far more substantial, and that has changed a lot over time. And so the $3.73 million investment in capital, as I just showed on the last slide, over 80% of that is coming from the capital non-recurring fund, about $3.14 million. And this shows you where the remaining dollars are coming from other funding sources: the town's management services fund, our LoSiP infrastructure grant, parking garage reserve, which is our transit fund, town aid road grant, and the Parks and Recreation Fund. This in turn shows where each of those $3.73 million will be invested. This is basically showing you the same thing that an earlier pie chart showed you. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each project individually. I would strongly encourage anybody who's interested to review the documents that have the detailed explanations of projects in the town's budget book, as well as the presentations that were given on April 8th, April 14th, and April 15th. Each of those provided an opportunity for departments that have made the requests to provide detailed explanations of their respective requests. But I will provide the summary information here. So Public Works, spanning a number of different uses, but the largest of which is road drainage and resurfacing. A total of just over $1.7 million has been requested by Public Works. As far as facilities and town buildings, again, spanning a wide range of projects and facilities, a total of just over $1.25 million. Public safety, general government and community services. The biggest ticket item within public safety is $170,000 to fund the replacement of the aerial pumper, the hybrid vehicle that I referenced earlier. The reason why there's money in this year's budget for that is the town's grant funding, or the grant funds that the town has been thus far awarded from the Small Cities Grant, falls a bit short of the total amount needed to purchase the desired apparatus. And so to make up that gap, that shortfall, there'd be about $170,000 needed from the town's capital funds to do that. Although we continue to be optimistic based on information we're receiving from the state, that additional state funds may become available in the near future for that, in which case we wouldn't be using any additional town funds for the replacement of that apparatus. And perhaps a quick note that the town is continuing its work on a comprehensive marketing plan and this is being done under the leadership of Cynthia Van Zelm and the Mansfield Downtown Partnership to help position the town and market the town to residents, visitors, and prospective businesses. So probably the most important single takeaway from the presentation, in the next couple slides. So if we assume for the moment that the ways in which the town can use American Rescue Plan dollars, and as I said, we're waiting on guidelines. Hopefully they'll be forthcoming soon. But if we assume for argument's sake that a very, very little or next to no funds from the American Rescue Plan can be used to offset anticipated operating expenses in next year's budget. This is what the mill rate would end up being based on the budget that I've proposed. So if there are no corresponding offsets that we can count on from the American Rescue Plan, the net effect would be an increase in the mill rate of 0.79. That would bring the mill rate to 32.17, up from the present mill rate, 31.38. And that would be just over 2.5% increase. And for somebody who owns a home valued at the median level, as of this past October, that value was $158,200. Anybody who owned a home at that median value would see an overall increase in their tax bill spread over two bills, but combined for the year, of about $125. Which would work out to a little over $10.40 on a monthly basis. In contrast, if we assume some use, although this is not the most liberal possible use by any stretch of American Rescue Plan funds, but some sort of catch point, if you will, and in particular, these numbers shown here suggest if we were able to use American Rescue Plan dollars to recover some lost earnings that we experienced in our interest income, the net effect would be a tax rate of 31.87, up from 31.38, or just under half a mil, and a percentage increase of 1.56. I know the council is very interested in doing everything responsible and possible to maintain the current tax rate, or a tax rate that comes in as close to the current tax rate as possible. I know that'll be a source of much deliberation and discussion, and staff will be analyzing both projected expenditures and projected revenues to figure out how we might be able to achieve that. But this is where things stand now, and this is where things stand in my current proposed budget. Just a little more information to share. As I mentioned on this slide, based on the assumed median home value of $158,200, if under this proposed or projected new mill rate, the hypothetical individual's tax burden was just over $5,000, this would show a breakdown of where each of those 5,089 tax dollars would ultimately go. And as you can see, a little over 60% of that overall amount would go to fund education, and the remaining amounts would fund other aspects of municipal government. With respect to other towns that we often compare ourselves to or use for a basis of comparison, our projected new mill rate, again, the mill rate that assumes no use of recovery plan dollars, still comes in over $5 under the mill rate of other towns that we use for comparison. That doesn't mean that we don't want to continue to do better and find ways to minimize or avoid any increases in the mill rate or potentially reduce the mill rate. But it is, it's healthy and a good practice to compare yourselves to other communities that have similar characteristics for benchmarking purposes. And it is encouraging to see that we're coming in quite a bit under those other towns. So just a quick summary, highlights from this presentation and highlights of my proposed budget. The budget funds current services, so maintains the current exceptional level of municipal services that residents and visitors of Mansfield have come to expect. It does not include the creation of any new full-time positions, so we are fully funding new positions that were created over the past year, but we're not funding any new positions or proposing the creation of any new positions. The budget meets any contractual obligations or non-discretionary obligations that the town has, continues to fund the pay-as-you-go capital improvement program, and does ultimately, based on what we're projecting, would impart a modest increase in the mill rate. And again, the budget is a starting point, and we're going to continue to be ever mindful of the lingering economic effects of the pandemic in terms of where we go from here. So just one more time, if you have any questions and you want to patch into this meeting to ask your questions live, you can call 646-749-3122.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you for that really comprehensive report. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. The median home value is actually $226,000. We tax on 70% of that rate. So the median taxable rate is $159,000.
Yes, I should have said median assessed value, which, as you said, is 70% of the overall market value. Yeah.
Right. These are two numbers that people always confuse. And if somebody said, I can't buy a house in this town for $160,000, they would be right, because that's way below the median value. I also want to comment that among the salary issues are returning our interim town manager to his full regular position as Director of Public Works. There was actually a vacancy left there while he was serving as interim town manager. And so that also contributed to an increase in those salaries. So we've had a lengthy presentation. Mr. Kotchenberger, do you want to add something about the further discussion and further opportunities for the public to contribute?
Yes, thank you. So in addition, of course, to this meeting, there will be a second formal public session on the budget. And again, that'll be scheduled either in late May or early June, after the town council has adopted a proposed, the budget that will then be presented to all the taxpayers. The second, however, there is always the opportunity to send in written comments at any time prior to the final budget adoption on questions or comments about the budget, as well as the various town council meetings we'll have, both the regular town council meetings on the second and fourth Mondays of every month, as well as a future, another budget workshop. There's always the opportunity there for public comment as well. And that does not need to be in writing, although, of course, for technical matters, it's always helpful to have comments in writing. So while we have scheduled only one more formal public session, as we do every year, we have two. There are plenty of ways and opportunities to let us know what you think. And again, email, as well as during the public comment period of various town council meetings. Thanks.
Thank you. Ryan, do we have any public participation? Has anybody requested to ask questions of you at this time?
I'm not aware of any questions that were submitted before the meeting, and it does not appear that anybody, I'm not seeing any call-in numbers or caller information on this GoToMeeting screen, so.
All right, well, people should know that you can always review this at a later time. If somebody wants to go back and take a look, this will be available on the town's website. And we will be obviously continuing to discuss where we go with this budget as time goes on. So I'd like to thank Mr. Kotchenberger for being part of this. He gets the next full meeting to himself. It's sort of a dry run for the town meeting where he does present the budget, and thank Mr. Aylesworth for his very detailed and thorough analysis of where we need to go and how we might get there. So thank you one and all, and with this I will close the information session.
One other just quick note, and it's okay that you've closed the meeting officially, but I did want to say, just on a personal level, I want to extend my thanks to all the department heads that have made this, I believe, a successful budget cycle. As the mayor said, we have 2 new key players, myself and a finance director that started within the past year and really had to kind of hit the ground running in terms of the budget this year. I myself started literally just a handful of days before the official kickoff of this year's budget season. And so while it's a very challenging time to start, it's also a great opportunity for me to get fully immersed and educated in everything that's going on. And so in some ways it worked out pretty well, but I want to do a special shout out to members of our finance team. Those folks are listed here, as well as my administrative assistant, Tasha, and Margaret Chady, our communication specialist. The folks that are listed on this slide, everybody's been working round the clock and really doing everything possible to make this a success, and including, pushing through times of tremendous adversity. And the finance department in particular has been short-handed, short-staffed for months and months. And so between a number of new faces, between being short-staffed, between dealing with, losses in our personal lives, it's been a incredibly challenging last few months, but I think it's a testament to everybody's professionalism that we've been able to come out of that and keep things on track and on target and on schedule the way that we have. So most sincere thank you from me to all members of my team.
Thank you, and I would like to also thank all the town hall employees and other town employees who've worked to carry the town through this past year. It's been, as you noticed, it's been really difficult. We are being extra cautious, and I hope that everybody out there stays safe, follows the rules, and we will get together as soon as it is possible and safe to do so. Get vaccinated. Thank you. So we'll close up.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Ms. Romney.
Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.